It's 1991. Birds and people are living together in seemingly perfect harmony. Until one day, a young man catches fire. This is Phoenix.
This is going to be a quick video explaining all the common problems that your first generation Scion TC could have. It's also like a video that you can use if you're trying to buy a Scion TC for the first time. So obviously I don't know everything, but take everything that I say with like a grain of salt, and you know, try and apply it to when you buy a Scion or if you already own one, and what to look out for. So first things first, the car is overall it's pretty reliable. It does its job. A lot of these things are known to make it well past 200,000 miles. But obviously there's some things along the way that make it so it doesn't happen that way. These earlier models, so this is going to be based off my experience with two models, one being a 2005 and one being a 2008. My girlfriend has a 2008, I have a 2005. So those are only really two ones I know. Yes, it should be the same across the board, but it isn't. Every single year has its generational problems, and you know, you can say that, you know, in between they kind of fix some things and then break other things. So these earlier models are pretty good. Usually you don't have any problems with the first models that come out. What problems you do have after you start seeing some mileage being put on the car is you get a lot of Evap codes, a lot of stuff like that for the first beginner models. And, you know, obviously stuff like that's not too much to worry about. A lot of the times when you see stuff like Evap codes or something where your check engine light goes on, you know, when you go to the dealership, they say, oh, you need a gas cap. You throw a gas cap in, it still doesn't fix the problem. There's a little Evap purge valve inside the engine bay. Sometimes those go a little bad. They're tiny little sensors. One more major thing is the gas tank starts to develop a tiny little leak. Not that it's leaking gas, but they start to, the top of the fuel sending unit has a rubber gasket on it, and sometimes over time it starts to degrade, and you start to smell some gas fumes. Depending on if you live in a rust-free area or not, the gas tank seams start to rust or rot out. That would also cause an evap leak. When it comes to things like a rust-free area or something like that, these cars do tend to rust. You have to make sure that when you go and buy one, that they are relatively clean. Not all of them rust. It's weird how some of them work, because a lot of them actually survive pretty good. And then a lot of other ones kind of just rot into the ground. So if you can buy one in a dry area, or if you are buying one on a salty, snowy area, or super damp all the time, lots of moisture, then make sure you lay underneath it and check to see, you know, if it's all completely rotted out. A lot of the times it's not the front of the car. A lot of the times it's the rear of the car, where the rear subframe is, and stuff like that. Some other common issues that these cars have are over time, there are power steering. This car has power steering lines. It obviously has a power steering pump. It's a power steering car. And it doesn't have a power steering cooler, but what it does have is a little yoop-de-doo that loops around to like the front of the car, and it acts as a cooler because it kind of sits a little behind the radiator, so it allows cool air to kind of flow by it. Now, does that do anything? No. It's a poor design, and what happens is there are these little bolt couplers on the car, just tiny little clamps that hold the lines in place. What happens is a lot of water gets trapped around those lines, and then it starts to eat away at the lines. It's a weird design because I redesigned mine All I did was cut the ends of the line off and route a rubber hose around it so I could bypass all like the hangers and stuff. It was really easy. It's quick. If it happens to your Scion, it's a relatively quick fix. It's nothing major. Yeah, but the clamps that are used to hold things together are often the failure points for rust or rot. So, you know, keep an eye out for that. Make sure you take a look at all the lines and stuff like that. If it's an automatic transmission car, which is one that my cousin actually had, I think she had a 2008 or 7 or something like that, and hers was an automatic transmission. Same deal. The lines start to rot based on how they're held. The little tabs that hold them in place are to hold them from moving around. You know, and they work kinda, but they don't really move around. They're solid, hard metal lines, so they're not really moving around that much anyways. So if it starts to rot around those points, just make sure you give a quick inspection around the line, stuff like that. People say that these engines are unreliable. My 2005 has almost 200,000 miles on it, doesn't burn any oil, runs great, and it's meticulous underneath the valve cover. So whoever kept up with the maintenance on it kept up with the maintenance on it before me. It's been to multiple track days. I work with it on the side. It just works out really well. I don't really have too many issues with it at all. Other than basic maintenance and stuff like that, and just me being an idiot. I mean, I don't have any personal problems with the engine and transmission. Sometimes the transmissions you have to check. These transmissions are notorious for the synchro meshes going bad. So if you're shifting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes you shift it in a third and you hear "nyeh," because sometimes the third gear synchro mesh goes bad. My second gear synchro mesh is starting to go bad. It's starting to get a little tougher to throw it in gear. So I have to kind of, it's very notchy. Every single time I go to the racetrack, it gets a little bit worse because, you know, I'm banging gears left and right. Mine's not grinding yet. My girlfriend's third gear in her car is grinding. If you kind of just slip it into neutral and then slip it into third, it won't grind. You kind of have to do a little pedal action, rev matching to help it out. The later models, I believe, have this problem more often than the earlier models do. If the synchro mesh is bad on the car, it's not really an issue or a problem. They still run and drive completely fine with it. You just have to be honest, like people think, oh, my synchro mesh is bad on my transmission, I have to put a new transmission in and or rebuild it. No, you really don't. You know, all you would really need to do is, you know, just baby it, make sure that, you know, it's okay, make sure it has enough fluid in it, and just kind of, you can drive it without the synchros as long as you know how to drive it. You kind of have to do a little pedal action to slip it into gear, and it will work every time. So it'll actually teach you how to drive your car a little better. Back to the engines. Mine's a 2005, my girlfriend's is a 2008. Hers burns crazy amounts of oil. For some reason, the later model versions of the same engine burn so much oil. So if you go online and you look at the 2005 version of this engine and you look at the 2008 version, there's very little difference. The 2008 model has like a 0.5 extra compression ratio. It makes the same horsepower, but it has a little bit of a higher compression ratio than the 2005 engine. But if you go and look to buy a 2005 engine, the 2005 engine is more expensive to buy than the 2008 engine. They do sell remanufactured models of the engine that go between 2005 to 2008. They don't change. You know, they don't, when they make a remanufactured engine, they don't make a year specific manufactured engine. It's from 2005 to 2008 is what they're going to make this engine for. So the 2005s, the lesser year models tend to burn less oil. The way it works is kind of the higher up you go, you have to really, you know, keep an eye out. I was able to keep an eye out for hers. It's ran pretty low on oil. I put some Lucas stop leak and compression seal in there. It slowed it down quite a bit, but that engine's probably going to need a rebuild at some point. When it blows up, we'll rebuild it. I mean, how are you supposed to check for that, right? So make sure when you start the car, make sure when you go and look at a car or start the car, check and see if it has oil in it first. You know, that's a common thing. You know, another thing is you'll be able to tell if an owner beat the crap out of the car or not. And to be honest, if it burns oil, just bring a super thick oil with you, and just pour that in your engine, and you should be all right. I mean, if it's already high miles, I mean, people buy these cars as like beater cars. These cars are pretty versatile. They can do a whole lot. I've done a whole lot with these cars. you know, you could do whatever you want other than drifting with it, to be honest. So if you're trying to look into the market to buy a Scion TC, these are, you know, they're one of the best, to be honest, in relation to like a Corolla or something, or any earlier model Toyota. For some reason, in the earlier 2000s, Toyotas are usually the best cars to buy, but they're so weird how they work. Some of them have engine oil consumption problems, and a lot of it happens because of the piston rings inside the engine. Sometimes there's carbon built up on the oil separator ring, so it's not oscillating around perfectly in the piston bore, and it's not kind of pulling that oil down, and it's kind of letting it go into the engine if it's not perfectly moving in the piston. A lot of the times they're just worn out from lack of oil changes, so it's again just letting oil slide right past the piston into the combustion chamber, stuff like that, you know. So yeah, I mean, like that's pretty much it when it comes to that. You just have to be mindful. It's hard to tell when you first buy a car. You know, if somebody does their oil change, like another good way to go by it is if you buy a car and the oil is pitch black in one of these cars, you could say that, yeah, they didn't maintain the car, but you can also say that it's also on its first oil change in a long time, and it hasn't burned through all of it. So that's a good way to figure that out, because when we bought my girlfriend's car, it had fresh oil put in it, and I'm like, oh, they did the oil change. Yeah, they did it because it was burning oil. That's why they probably just added oil. So there's that. And yeah, I mean, they're pretty good. So another problem that I usually see with these cars is the brakes. And I know that's weird. It's not that the brakes don't work. So if you ever have a problem where the pedal just starts to sink all the way to the floor on your Scion TC, yeah, there's nothing actually wrong. It's not the booster. People think it's the booster. They changed the booster. It has the same problem. You know, right after you change your pads and rotors, it has the same problem, stuff like that. What it actually is the way that the caliper is designed isn't perfectly sandwiching the brake pads to the rotor. The caliper starts to grab over the outboard brake pad, and it starts to apply pressure there, and it starts to grab it. So what happens is before the inside piston starts to push in, like, you have to make sure these slide pins are completely 100% lubed up, and this will increase your chances the best that you possibly can. What happens is if they start to get even a little remotely stuck, just a tiny bit to where they start to stick, your slide pins on your brake caliper, the outboard pad and the caliper itself start to grab over the outboard pad, and they put pressure more on the outboard pad, on the inside of the outboard pad, more than the inboard pad. So when it grabs over, it's wearing the outboard one faster. Now, you don't feel this when you're driving. It feels like a completely normal pedal. But let's say you go to put different brake rotors on your car, different brake pads, or you just do a new brake job for the first time. You know, if the pad's mating surface and the rotor's mating surface aren't completely straight the first time, like they're not completely flush, you'll feel like the pedal, for some reason, it's like you just did your brakes. How could this happen? You'll push it all the way to the floor, and you'll feel like it has no pressure, or it's really spongy, or it picks up right at the bottom. And you're like, how? I just put brake pads on it. What you do is when you break in your new brake pads and rotors, you have to really get on a straight road, go 60, and then stop. Do like full-blown, like, not lock up brakes, but apply that pressure. Let the mating surface of the rotor and the pad wear down at the same rate, and then your pedal will start to come back up. I had this problem multiple times, and I was just trying to figure it out multiple times, and I just couldn't, and I was trying to figure out why. So I had someone sit in the car with me while they pushed the pedal down, and as I saw it happening, my rotor, just from using it regularly, became more worn down on the inside, because when I go to the racetrack, I just hot swap pads. I never really swap over my rotors because it's expensive, and I don't care about the noise and the squealing. I just keep hot swapping my brake pads. I noticed that when I put a new set of brake pads on it, there was like this much gap between the inside of my brake rotor and the inside and the outboard pad on one side of the pad. The outside edge of the pad was touching the rotor, but the inside part of the pad was like hovering over it. So when you push down on the pedal, the brake caliper clamps on the outside of the on the inside of the brake pad to like push it downwards. My rotor was more worn on the inside diameter of it than the outside, so your pedal goes all the way to the floor. The solution around this is you need to break in your brakes properly. If you do change your brakes on these types of cars, only in the front, I've noticed. In the front, you need to change your pads and rotors. If you're hot swapping pads, you might not have good luck. You need to hot swap the pads and the rotors in the front. In the rear, another common problem is the caliper doesn't ride on a typical slide pin like you'd see on the front calipers. It's a solid slide, and what happens is there's no bolt. You essentially there's one bolt on the bottom just so you can pivot the caliper up. Those upper slide pins that are this thick get seized so many times. You have to make sure that those slide pins are cleaned and greased up, because they get stuck and they make it so your rear brakes just do not work as good. I was at the track and my rear right brake, once it started getting hot, started locking up on me because this rear right caliper started to seize on that little metal slide pin. So you have to make sure that the rear slide pins and the rear calipers are lubricated. When you buy a Scion TC or you have one, take it to a shop or do it yourself. Inspect the brakes. You know, if you need to get a little oxygen and acetylene torch to heat up that part of the caliper just so you could slide it off, because that's what I had to do. Make sure you do that. Make sure everything is greased up and moving and free and clear. You know, that should be a service that people do at dealerships, but they don't. So, you know, go around, go to a family shop, have them inspect your brakes. Even if it needs them, just make sure all the slide pins are moving freely. That's really important. Another thing that I noticed that you need to be a little bit mindful of is if you ever do maintenance, like spark plugs or anything like that on these, the plugs for the coil packs start to get a little brittle. So no matter how many times you just put a gentle amount of pressure on it to take them off, the clip just breaks off the coil pack. You can use a zip tie and wrap them back up and tie them around the coil pack and call it a day, and then that'll be that. It's a simple fix, but it's also a simple problem. I thought it was something to bring up. You know, the occasional valve cover gasket leak. Usually when you get these cars, you get them a little older, so you take the spark plugs out. Sometimes there's a little oil in the spark plug holes. Every single car I've had, every Scion, I pulled spark plugs and there was always oil in the cylinder and the spark plug holes. So it's just the way they are. So usually check your valve cover gasket, make sure it's not leaking. It can cause misfires. Window switches. Another thing you need to look out for is your window switches. Sometimes your window switches are the mechanism to move your window up and down go bad. You know, overuse of the windows, whatever, or normal use of the windows, the window switches tend to just go bad, stop working, yada yada yada. All right, so as far as I'm concerned right now, that's about it. That's a majority of the problems that these cars have right now. And that's all the ones that usually come up to mind. Speakers, you know, a lot of the other stuff is more of a general maintenance thing. Like, yeah, your speakers go bad after a certain point. Like this car's speakers are blown. It has 200,000 miles. But yeah, I guess you can associate that with the common problem, especially if you're looking to buy the car. You know, and a lot of them are higher mileage ones, so just be wary of that. You know, other than that, I'm just gonna call it there. If there's any other common problems that any other people seem to have or something, put it down in the comments. Just like the video, subscribe. Take care.